how can we have connective conversations about race? That's the question we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More. Today, I have joining with me Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, author and co-author of the book Colorful Connections, 12 Questions About Race That Open Healthy Conversations. Her co-author, Lori Roleveld, was not able to be here today, but we will be having her join us in spirit as we are discussing the content of this book. Welcome, Dr. Smith. I'm so thrilled to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
It is my pleasure to be here with you, Tina.
So as we continue this conversation about how to have connective conversations about race, let's dive into some of those ground rules that you want to set when you're having these healthy conversations to invite people to be more inclusive, to self-examine and determine where you might have some blind spots, and to grow together and become more well-rounded people, to become richer people by having more diverse relationships with others. What are some of the things that are key points that you want to put into those conversations beforehand so that you can make sure they're guided in the right direction?
Yeah, that was one of the things that came from Lori's book, The Art of Hard Conversations. And it really boils around making sure that you enter into this process with someone who already knows kind of how it's going to progress along. For ourselves, some of the ground rules that we end up setting were, if in the process of going back and forth over a question, something specifically hurt me in some way or caused me to feel as if I was going to be offended or have some type of affront to not hold that in, because holding that in, what it does, it just creates a wound that never gets a chance to be healed. And you never get to bring that to light to be able to bring any type of resolution to it. And so it just becomes like this festering problem. And so a big one was just making sure that we kept the gates of communication open, even if that gate was allowing things through that we were not comfortable with, but to understand that we both had permission to say, this hurt me, or to have permission to say, I don't understand what you mean here, and to ask for clarification, or to have permission to say, I'm not sure I'm ready to discuss that right now, but I can discuss this right now. To be able to give some freedom within the conversation to push in at times and to back up at times, and to allow ourselves the opportunity to go through the conversation as part of the healing journey, because we all heal at different levels. We all heal at different stages and in different ways. And we have to be able to respect each other's healing process, because for myself, that's a big part of what these conversations are about. It's opening the door so that healing can come into places where wounds have been for too long.
Yes. Oh, that's such a beautiful thing. And I love that you are being willing to be vulnerable. And that had to take some courage to put yourself out there as someone who's willing to share where you've been hurt and what kinds of things might be hurtful to you. They might be different than things that are hurtful to other people. We can't assume that everyone's the same, even if they have similar ethnicities. So how did you convince yourself to move forward with this project? That had to be very difficult.
It was. I initially, when I got Lori's email proposing the whole project, initially I opened it up, I read her email, I closed it up, I backed away, and I looked at my husband and I said, you're not going to believe what this author just wrote to me. And he was like, like what? Like, is it something, horrible, like really bad? Like, and I was like, no, it's not something that was really bad. It was just something that I had no intentions of ever writing a book about. It was such a shock to me, because it's not a topic that I normally would talk about. Simply being because it's a difficult topic. It's a very difficult topic. And so, for myself, I had to get to a place where, after I didn't reply back to Lori initially, I kind of told my husband, and I was like, I'm just going to pray about it, because I didn't get an immediate no, but it was just a little bit of hesitation. And so I spent some time praying about it. And it was during this, I have two sons. And so it was during this time that so much was going on in the world as it relates to race and, unexpected deaths and all sorts of things that were just happening at the time. And, I was praying one night and I just really felt like, why would I not? Why would I not take the opportunity to speak life into where there was so much death? That's a big part of my ministry. It's about affirming and giving alternative options. That's the whole I choose my best life. And I thought, in order to be able to see a world that I envision for my sons one day, I can't sit back and just assume other people are going to do what I wish they would do, or speak on the topics or write on the topics I wish somebody else would write on. Even if I'm not an expert in it, am I willing to research? Am I willing to dive deep? Am I willing to be vulnerable? Because if I'm not willing to do that, I shouldn't ask anyone else to do it either.
I so admire your courage for being willing to put your heart before the things that would naturally be, our human response is to be risk averse. That's a natural human response. And for you to see love instead as the higher priority, and to see unity and healing and bringing people close and building bridges as a bigger priority than self-protection, that just needs to be recognized. So I also want to ask you, what would you say to that person who's listening, who would say, I just don't have the courage to speak on that topic to other people, to reach out to people who aren't like me, because I don't know how that conversation's going to go? How would you encourage that person to reach past their fear to building bridges of love?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's one that we had quite a few of our guest speakers or authors, I should say, that were within the book joining us answer. And I think it was either Joe Saxton or Jamie Ivy that actually said something along the lines of, if you don't feel comfortable entering into the conversation yourself, start with listening to voices that are different than your own. And so they gave some specific names of like podcasters or people even on Instagram, just following people who are different ethnicities, different voices, talk about these types of topics, so that you are at least exposing yourself to something different. And then you're basically starting with that listening first step, whether it's listening through a podcast or a radio show or teaching or training, you're allowing yourself to begin simply by exposing yourself to what other people are saying on the topic.
So if someone is of a Caucasian race or a race that's had background in marginalization and oppression and abuse, would either of those spaces be places where they need to listen to their own heart and listen to the hearts of others?
I think it doesn't matter which side of the ethnicity spectrum you're on. Everyone has to listen, because whether you are Caucasian, whether you are Asian, African American, Black, Latino, whatever paradigm you find yourself within, you can learn something by listening to someone else, because you have not experienced all there is to experience, because you haven't been all the different versions of people that you could be. So someone who is Black doesn't know what it's like to be Asian in the US. And, one of our guest authors that we had contributing, she spoke on this as it related to COVID, and people saying things like I'm trying to think how she termed it, the Chinese flu or something like the Chinese virus or whatever people were saying at the time. And she commented on how that made her feel. Well, I hadn't even thought too much about that when people said that. Part of me even thought they're just relating to where supposedly it originated from. But her take on it was something completely different, especially as it related to how people responded to her parents who owned a store in a certain town. And so when you start thinking about it that way, you realize that unless you listen to people and share their experience from their life journey in their skin, you don't really know how they're feeling on a topic and why certain things may be offensive or hurtful or painful to them.
And the book also shares that it isn't recommended to pick one person and make them the expert on their entire ethnicity because everybody's individual experiences will differ, and nobody wants to be that token representative
Yes.
of their entire ethnicity. But people make that mistake often.
So often. And you know their heart behind it. You know that, I mean, you can assume at least their heart behind it. But we have to stop doing that because no one person can speak for everybody. And it's so individualized because what may be a wounding for me may not be a wounding for someone else. And so I think that's part of the reason why it seems like racial issues are so hard to resolve, because we try to resolve it on kind of like this huge global scale all at once, where we really need to bring it more closer to home, deal with the heart that's in front of us, deal with the just the personal relationships that are in front of us, grow those, build up those, edify those, and from those individual kind of edifications we can actually see a greater change within our culture. But when we try to just hit it through the culture as a whole, there are so many different experiences that individual people don't get the heart healing that they need, so that the greater culture can actually experience a healing in itself.
And you also mentioned that you can make the opposite mistake by being colorblind, so to speak, and just trying to ignore the whole issue of race altogether when you're in relationship with somebody. But then you're missing some of the things that are really important to that individual. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So true. I don't recall if it was Lori that said it or maybe I just brought it up, but I know one of the things that I hear so often from well-meaning Christians usually is that they make the statement, "I'm colorblind." They'll say, "When I see you, I'm colorblind. I don't see a Black woman." And it is a painful statement, because basically you're saying that some of the things that make me the most of who I am are the very things you're ignoring about me, which means you're only choosing to see the parts of me that align with what you're comfortable with. And you're not willing to see the parts of me that you have yet to become comfortable with. And so we really never want anyone to be colorblind. We want them to be color aware, not in a place where that is the determination of how they view a person, but they are aware of whether someone is of a certain ethnicity group. And we want them to be culturally sensitive. And so those are the statements that we really want from people, that they are aware of what our colors are, but they're not necessarily focused. They're not determining who we are, our value, or our ability to assist them based on what they see. They're giving us the opportunity to, as Martin Luther King says, to be judged by the content of our own character and not be lumped into groups based on those kind of identifiers.
So we're not defined solely by the color of our skin, but we want to make sure that people recognize that that is part of who we are as well.
It's part of our ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That is so wonderful. And I really appreciate all of the wonderful wealth of opportunity that you have provided in the context of this book and in the ongoing conversations that you can have in all the different ministries that you offer and that Lori offers. How can people stay in touch with you and stay in touch with Lori and get a copy of Colorful Connections?
Yeah, so be sure to visit colorfulconnectionsbooks.com. There we actually have a study guide that'll help you walk through the process so that you can do it with a group. We actually have some conversation starter questions as well, and some opportunities for you to be able to engage with this process of praying through even before you begin. We have a pre-prayer journal where you can begin to look at, how do I prepare myself to even go into conversations like this so that I do go in with an open heart. And then the book's available wherever books are sold, christianbooks.com. Always go to your independent Christian bookstore if you have one nearby. We always want to support them. And then, of course, Amazon and all the other places have it as well.
Well, I so appreciate all of you listening, and I hope that you have had your heart stirred toward becoming more aware of how you can grow through books like Colorful Connections and invite those who you work with, people that you're in ministry with, to get copies of Colorful Connections so that you can all grow and become more like the way God designed the body of Christ to connect with one another. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.